What do you do when everything you love is already leaving? Not someday. Not in some distant future you can prepare for. But now, right now, as you listen to these words, the breath you just took is gone. The sound of this voice is dissolving even as it reaches you. The thought you had a moment ago has already become something else, or nothing at all. This is what the Buddha pointed to with his final words, not as philosophy, not as something to believe, but as the truth you are living inside of, whether you notice it or not. All things are impermanent. He said this while dying. While his own body was failing, while his students sat around him weeping, while everything they had built together was about to change in ways they could not control. Imagine water moving through your hands, not rushing, just flowing. You can feel it, cool and real, but you cannot hold it. The harder you close your fingers, the faster it escapes. This is not because you are doing something wrong. This is the nature of water. The Buddha was not offering comfort in that moment. He was offering sight. Take a breath now. Feel it enter. Feel it leave. You did not decide when it would end. It ended on its own. And another breath has already begun without your permission, without your planning. This is impermanence. Not as an idea about the future, but as the texture of this moment. We spend so much time trying to make things stay, trying to freeze the good moments, trying to push away the hard ones, trying to build something solid enough that it will not change. And underneath all of that effort is a question we rarely speak out loud. If nothing lasts, what is the point of any of this? The Buddha did not answer this question by denying impermanence. He did not say, well, some things last. He did not say, but your soul is eternal. He did not offer a loophole. He went deeper into the truth. All things are impermanent. All conditioned things. Everything that arises from causes. Everything that depends on something else to exist. Your thoughts, your feelings, your body, your relationships, the sound of rain, the taste of tea, the ache in your chest, the hope you are carrying, the fear you are trying to escape. Even this moment, right now, is already becoming the past. But here is what we miss when we first hear this teaching. We think impermanence means loss. We think it means nothing matters. We think it means we should not care, should not love, should not build anything or hope for anything. We think the water moving through our hands is a tragedy. The Buddha saw something else. He saw that impermanence is not what takes things away. Impermanence is what allows anything to exist at all. Without impermanence, there would be no breath, no growth, no healing, no change of heart, no possibility of waking up. The pain you are carrying right now, the one that feels like it will never end, is impermanent. The confusion you have been sitting with, the one that feels solid and unchanging, is already shifting, already becoming something else. This is not a promise that everything will get better. This is an observation about what is already happening. Listen to the sounds around you. Do not try to name them. Just notice how they appear and disappear. How they rise and fall without asking your permission. You are not separate from this rising and falling. You are made of it. Your heartbeat, your thoughts, the sensations moving through your body right now. All of it is appearing and disappearing, moment by moment, breath by breath. The Buddha spoke his last words not to depress his students, but to free them. To point them toward the one thing they could actually work with. Not the fantasy of permanence. Not the hope that something, somewhere, would finally stay still, but this changing, flowing, dissolving moment. The water in your hands is not a problem to solve. It is the only water there is. So what happens when you stop trying to hold it? When you let your hands stay open? when you feel the coolness, the movement, the presence of it, without grasping. This is where the practice begins, not in understanding impermanence as a concept, but in meeting it directly, in your breath, in your body, in the quiet space between one moment and the next. We are going to sit with this together, not to master it, not to fix it, but to see it clearly. There is a story that comes to us from the very end of the Buddha's life. His students gathered around him as he lay dying, and in those final moments, he offered them words that would become the last teaching he gave. All conditioned things, he said, are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. We know these words. We have heard them perhaps many times. And yet there is a peculiar distance between hearing something and feeling its truth in the marrow of our own life. The words arrive in our ears clean and whole, but they do not always reach the place where we actually live. We nod. We understand intellectually. And then we return to the day, to the plans we are making, to the person we are trying to become, to the things we are holding as though they will not slip away. The Buddha was not speaking in abstraction. He was not offering a philosophical principle to be filed away and discussed. He was offering an observation made from a lifetime of patient looking. And he was offering it at the moment when his own life was demonstrating the truth of what he was saying. His body was failing. His breath was becoming shallow. The form that had walked and taught and sat in meditation for 80 years was returning to the elements. He was not afraid. He was not clinging. He was simply watching what was true, and he was speaking it aloud. When we hear the words, all conditioned things are subject to decay, something in us resists. We know it is true. We have seen it countless times. We have watched people we love grow older. We have felt our own bodies change. We have seen empires rise and fall in the span of a few news cycles. And yet we continue to live. The things we care about most might somehow be exempted from this law. We might not say this aloud. We might not even admit it to ourselves. But our actions reveal it. We grasp. We plan as though the future is solid. We arrange our lives around the preservation of things that cannot be preserved. There is a moment, just before a candle flame goes out. The wick flares bright, almost brighter than before, as if gathering itself for one final gesture. The light grows sharp and clear, and then, with no drama at all, it simply ceases. The wax that fed the flame is still there, but the conditions that allowed the burning are no longer present. The flame does not resist. It does not bargain. It does not try to reignite itself. It simply ends, and the silence that follows is complete. We are like that flame, not in a morbid sense, not as a cause for despair, but as a simple fact of what we are. The conditions that brought us into being will, in time, no longer hold. The body will age. The mind will change. The relationships we treasure will transform or end. The projects we are building will eventually be abandoned or completed or forgotten. This is not a tragedy. It is not a punishment. It is the nature of everything that is made of parts, everything that arises and passes, everything that is conditioned. And yet we live as though we have not heard this. We live as though the next moment is guaranteed. We postpone the difficult conversation. We hold back the kind word. We stay in the small cage of our resentments because we believe there will be time to step out later. We invest our hope in outcomes we cannot control, and when those outcomes do not arrive as we imagined, we suffer not from the loss itself, but from the collision between what we expected and what actually happened. The Buddha's final teaching carries a second part, and it is equally important. Strive on with diligence. This is not a call to frantic effort. It is not a demand that we work harder, achieve more, become better. It is an invitation to show up fully for the life that is actually here, to pay attention, to engage with care and presence, knowing that this engagement is what makes a life meaningful, not the permanence of its results. When you understand that all things are impermanent, the quality of your attention changes. You are no longer trying to freeze a moment in place. You are no longer demanding that this person stay exactly as they are, or that this circumstance last forever, or that you yourself remain unchanged. Instead, you can meet what is here with a kind of tender awareness. You can see the preciousness of things precisely because they will not last. You can love more freely because you are not trying to make love into a possession. This is where the practice lives, not in your thinking but in your direct noticing. Today, as you move through your hours, there is something simple you can do. Choose one thing to observe. It might be a person you see regularly. It might be a plant in your home. It might be your own hands. Look at it as you would have looked at it yesterday, and then notice what has changed. Not in a way that creates anxiety, but in a way that simply opens your eyes. The light has fallen differently on the face. The plant has turned slightly toward the window. Your hands have moved through countless small actions that have left their mark. Nothing is the same as it was. This noticing is not morbid, it is alive. It is how we begin to feel, not just know, what the Buddha was saying at the end of his life. It is how we stop living at a distance from the truth and start living inside it. There is a story very old now about the Buddha's final teaching. He did not speak it from a throne or in a great hall. He lay on his side, between two trees, and his last words to his students were simple. He said, "All things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence." Then he died. Not a grand proclamation, not a mystery to solve, just a whisper, really, about what he had always seen, and what he was asking his students to see. When we listen to that teaching now, it can feel distant, like something that happened long ago to people in robes. But the Buddha was not speaking about time passing in the abstract. He was not asking you to believe something on faith. He was pointing to something you can notice right now, in this very moment, if you turn your attention toward it. The thing we do not want to see is this: we are always reaching for something to stay the same. We find a moment that feels good and we grip it. We find a person we love and we whisper to ourselves, "Let this never change." We find a way of being that feels safe and we build walls around it. We find a thought that feels true and we defend it as though our life depends on it. And underneath all of this reaching is a quiet, stubborn belief. The belief that something, somewhere, can be held still. The Buddha's last teaching was not about sadness. It was not a message of loss. It was a pointing towards something you are already experiencing, whether you name it or not. Everything you touch is already moving. Everything you feel is already dissolving. Everything you think you know is already becoming something else. You do not have to believe this. You can simply watch. Consider morning dew on grass. If you have ever seen it, you know that quality of trembling, of gathering light. The dew sits there, perfect and whole, and it seems as though it might last. But you also know, without being told, that it will not. The sun will touch it, the air will warm, and what was there will become vapor, will rise, will join the sky. No one grieves the dew. No one says, "How tragic that it must disappear." We see it, we notice its beauty, and we understand in our bones that this is its nature. This is what it means to be dew. And yet, when we turn that same clear seeing toward our own experience, something tightens. We do not want to be like the dew. We want to be like stone, like something permanent, something that endures. We want our body to hold its shape. We want our feelings to make sense. We want our mind to stay clear and certain. We want the people we love to remain exactly as they are. And in that wanting, in that resistance to what is already happening, something in us begins to suffer. The Buddha described this with precision. He said form is impermanent. Your body is not stable. It is changing moment by moment. Cells are dying. Sensations are arising and passing. The shape you think of as yourself is more like a river than a stone. And when you cling to the belief that it should stay the same, you create friction with reality itself. He said, feeling is impermanent. The textures of your experience, pleasure, pain, neutrality, they do not hold. What feels good now will fade. What feels unbearable now will shift. And the moment you realize this, the moment you stop fighting the natural movement of feeling, something settles. He said, perception is impermanent. The way you see things right now is not fixed. Your understanding changes. What seemed true yesterday may look different today. And there is freedom in this. You are not locked into any single way of seeing. He said, formations are impermanent. The patterns you have built, your habits, your stories about who you are, the structures you have constructed to feel safe, they are all in motion. They too are dissolving and reforming, moment after moment. And finally, consciousness is impermanent. Even awareness itself does not stand still. The knowing that is happening right now will give way to the next moment of knowing. There is no observer standing outside of change, watching it happen to everything else. You are part of the flow. This is not philosophy. This is what the Buddha was inviting his students to see directly, and it is what he is inviting you to see now. If you are in a place where you can sit quietly, you might notice this for yourself. Not as an idea, but as a lived experience. Sit for a few moments and simply attend to 3 sensations in your body. Perhaps the weight of your shoulders. Perhaps the coolness of the air at your nostrils. Perhaps the subtle pulse of your heartbeat. Do not try to make anything happen. Just notice. Notice how each sensation is already moving. The weight shifts slightly. The coolness changes as you breathe. The pulse quickens or slows. Notice how none of them hold still. Notice how, the moment you truly look, you cannot find anything in your direct experience that is not already in the process of becoming something else. This is what the dew knows. This is what the grass knows. This is what the Buddha saw so clearly that it became his last word. And when you see it yourself, not as a belief, but as a living perception, something in you stops struggling against the way things are. The Buddha's last words were simple. All things are impermanent, not a philosophy to believe in, not a truth to memorize, just an observation. The kind of thing you notice when you stop looking away. We live mostly in the solid parts of life. The shape of a day, the weight of a thought, the feeling of being ourselves. These feel like things, like objects we can hold, and we do hold them. We hold them tight. We prefer what feels good and push away what doesn't. We build our whole lives around this preference. Stay with what's pleasant. Avoid what's painful. Keep what's ours. But there is a space we miss. Not a space you can see with your eyes. It's the space where change actually happens. The gap between one moment and the next. The pause between one wave and the next. Most of us never notice it because we're always looking at the wave itself, never at the water returning to stillness. When you watch a wave rise and fall, you see the wave. You see its shape, its motion, its drama. But the wave is not separate from the ocean. The ocean is always there, and between one wave and the next, there is a pause, a return. The water doesn't become something else. It simply stops being a wave for a moment. Then another wave rises. If you only watch the waves, you miss the ocean entirely. You miss the space where the wave was never really separate at all. This is what we miss about impermanence. We think impermanence means things fall apart. Things die, things leave us, and yes, that happens. But impermanence also means there is a space where nothing is happening, where nothing is solid, where everything is still becoming. The old Zen saying goes like this: the way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. This doesn't mean you should have no feelings. It means something subtler. It means when you stop clinging to one wave and pushing away the next, you can feel the ocean. When you stop insisting that life should be different than it is, you can see what's actually here. Most of our suffering comes from missing this space. We see the wave of sadness and we fight it. We see the wave of joy and we grip it. We see the wave of boredom and we despise it. All this fighting and gripping happens in the waves. We never touch the ocean, but the moment you notice the pause between one wave and the next, something shifts. You're no longer only in the drama of the wave. You're touching something else, something that doesn't come and go. Not because it's eternal, but because it was never really separate from the motion in the first place. This is why the Buddha said what he said at the end, not as a warning, as a pointer. Look here. Look at what's actually happening. Everything that rises will fall. Everything that comes together will come apart. And in that falling apart, in that space between, there is something you've been missing. You can taste this yourself. Not through belief, through direct sensing, through your own breath. Let yourself settle for a moment. You don't need to sit in any special way. Just be where you are. Let your attention rest on your breath, not controlling it. Not making it deeper or slower. Just noticing the breath as it is, the way it comes in, the way it goes out. Now follow 5 full cycles of your breath, in and out, but pay special attention to the end of each exhale. That moment, when the breath has left your body and the next breath hasn't arrived yet. That pause, that gap, the first cycle, just notice it's there. The breath goes out and there is a small space before the next breath comes in. You might not have noticed this space before. It's easy to miss. We're usually already thinking about the next breath before this one has even finished. The second cycle, let yourself rest in that gap a little longer. Not forcing anything, just noticing how long it actually is. It's longer than you think. There's real time there, real space. The third cycle, notice what happens in that space. Is there stillness? Is there a sense of suspension? Does the body feel different there than it does during the motion of breathing? Does the mind feel different? The fourth cycle, you might notice something interesting. In that gap, there's no preference. You're not trying to make the breath come back. You're not pushing the exhale away. You're simply in the space where breath is not happening, and you're still alive. You're still aware. The fifth cycle, let the pause speak for itself. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to hold on to it. Just let it be what it is. A moment where change pauses, where the wave returns to the ocean, where you touch something that doesn't come and go because it was never really separate from the motion. This is the space the Buddha was pointing to. Not somewhere you have to travel to. Not somewhere you have to earn. It's right here, between one breath and the next, between one thought and the next, between one moment and the next. The way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. In that gap, in that pause, There is no preference. There is only what is. And when you taste that, even for a moment, everything changes. Not because you've become different, but because you've stopped insisting that you should be. The Buddha's last teaching was simple. He lay on his side, his body failing, and he said all things are impermanent. Everything that arises passes away, not as a metaphor, not as philosophy, as fact. And then he died. There is something stark about those words at the end of a life. Not a grand vision, not a promise of reward, just the plain observation of what is. And yet this one teaching, whispered as his breath was leaving, is said to contain everything his students needed to know. We do not often think of impermanence as liberating. We think of it as loss. We think of it as the reason we suffer, and that is partly true. But there is something else happening beneath that suffering. Something we do to ourselves again and again without noticing. We are exhausted, not because things change, but because we are trying to stop them from changing. Feel the difference. The world is always in motion. Seasons turn, bodies age, relationships shift, moods rise and fall. This is not a problem. This is simply what is happening. But somewhere inside us, we have decided that certain things should not change. The people we love should stay as they are. Our bodies should remain young. Our happiness should be permanent. Our circumstances should be stable. And so we push against the current. We grip, we hold, we resist. This is where the exhaustion lies. Imagine trying to hold water in open hands, not cupped hands which might work for a moment. Open hands, palms flat. The water begins to slip through your fingers immediately. So you grip harder. You tense your muscles. You focus all your attention on holding, and the water still flows. So you grip harder still. Your hand becomes cramped. Your forearm aches. Sweat forms on your palm, and the water is still leaving. Eventually, you are so tired you have to let go. And in that moment of release, there is a strange kind of rest. This is not a poetic image. This is what we do with everything we touch. We do it with people. We meet someone, and they fit into our life in a particular way, and we like that shape, and so we try to keep them in it. We do not say this to ourselves. We do not think, I am now going to prevent this person from changing. But we act as though they should stay as they are. When they grow in a direction we did not expect, we feel hurt. When they need something different than they needed before, we feel disappointed. We are not angry at them. We are angry at change itself, and they are the ones in front of us. We do it with our own minds. We have a version of ourselves we have decided is correct. We are patient. We are strong. We are calm. And then one day we are not. We are irritable. We are afraid. We are restless. And instead of noticing that this is simply what is arising right now, we treat it as a failure. We grip. We tell ourselves we should not be this way. We exhaust ourselves trying to force our mind back into the shape we prefer. We do it with our bodies. We have a memory of how we moved, how we felt, how we looked, and time passes, and the body changes, and we resist, we diet, we exercise, we worry, we compare ourselves to how we were, and the body still ages. The body still weakens. The body still becomes unfamiliar to us, and in our resistance, we add suffering on top of the simple fact of change. The Buddha's last words point to something very specific. Not that change is sad, not that we should give up, but that the moment we decide something must not change, we have planted the seed of our own suffering. Because the one thing that is absolutely certain is that everything changes. Everything. There is no exception, no special thing you can find or create or protect that will remain as it is. This is not depressing when you stop resisting it. it is actually the opposite. It is the only news that is reliable, the only law that never fails. Everything that is difficult will pass. Everything that is pleasant will pass. Every version of yourself that you think is permanent is already becoming something else. The teaching is not to give up. It is to stop exhausting yourself by fighting what is already true. So there is something worth noticing here. Not as an idea, but as a felt experience. There is something you are holding on to right now, not physically, but in your attention, in your effort, in your hope that it will stay as it is. It might be a relationship. It might be a version of yourself. It might be a circumstance. It might be a feeling you want to keep. It might even be a belief about how your life should go. As you sit here in this quiet moment, you might notice where that grip is, where your hands are clenched around something that is already flowing away. You do not need to let go. You do not need to do anything. Just notice what it feels like to hold so tightly. Notice the tension. Notice the effort. Notice what your body does when it is trying to stop the river. This is where the fatigue lies, not in the change itself, in the resistance. There is a story that has been told for many centuries. Near the end of his life, the Buddha sat with his students gathered close. His body was failing, his breath was shallow, and in those final moments, he offered what many remember as his last teaching. All things are impermanent. Anicca, everything that arises will pass away. It is a simple statement, almost plain. Yet we spend our whole lives learning to feel what those words actually mean, not just to understand them as ideas. What makes this teaching so difficult to rest in is not the truth of it. Deep down, you already know that everything changes. You have felt it. You have lost things. You have watched your own body age. You have seen people you love move away or die. Impermanence is not a secret. It is woven through every moment of living. What is difficult is that we do not sit still with this knowledge. The moment we feel the weight of it, the moment we sense that nothing we cling to will last, we reach for something. We reach for distraction. We fill the silence with noise. We pick up our phones. We plan. We worry. We organize. We tell ourselves stories about how to control what cannot be controlled. We do anything but simply be present with the fact that things are changing, that we are changing, and that this is not a problem to be solved. The Buddha's last words point to something radical. They point to a way of living that does not depend on fighting impermanence or pretending it is not there. They point instead to a kind of rest. A resting that comes when we stop trying to make things permanent, when we stop filling the space where acceptance could arise with our own frantic effort. There is a teaching that comes from the Zen tradition. It says sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. This is not poetry for poetry's sake. It is a direct description of how life actually works when we are not in the way of it. Watch the leaves in autumn. They do not cling to the branch. They do not argue with the season. They do not try to remain green. When the time comes, they simply let go. There is no effort in their falling, no resistance, no negotiation with gravity or time. They fall, and in their falling, they are completely themselves. There is a wholeness in that surrender that we rarely experience in our own lives. We have been taught the opposite. We have been taught that we must always be doing something, improving something, fixing something. We must optimize. We must strive. We must make ourselves into something better than we are. And in that constant reaching, we have lost the ability to simply be. We have forgotten what it feels like to sit quietly and let life unfold without our interference. the space where acceptance could arise. That is the space we are most afraid of. Because in that space, we cannot hide from impermanence. We cannot pretend that we are in control. We cannot distract ourselves with the next project or the next goal. In that space, we must meet reality as it actually is. And reality, as it actually is always changing, always slipping away, always becoming something else. But here is what is strange. When you finally sit in that space, when you finally stop filling it with noise, something shifts. You begin to notice that the changing itself has a kind of grace to it. The way light moves across a wall, the way your breath comes in and goes out, the way thoughts arise and dissolve, the way your body rests in the chair or on the floor. None of these things are permanent. All of them are happening right now. And when you are not fighting them, when you are not trying to make them stay, there is a kind of ease in witnessing them. This is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is not becoming passive or numb. It is the opposite. It is coming fully alive to what is actually here, in this moment, without the burden of trying to make it last forever. The invitation, then, is simple. It is to sit for 10 minutes without trying to fix or change anything. Not to meditate in the sense of trying to achieve some special state. Not to improve yourself or make progress. Just to sit, to notice what is here. Your breath, the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, the thoughts that come and go, the feelings that arise and pass away. To let them all be exactly as they are. You do not need to do anything with what you notice. You do not need to make it mean something. You do not need to work with it or transform it. Just sit. Just observe. Just be present. And in that presence, without any effort on your part, something begins to relax. The constant reaching eases. The noise quiets. And in that quieting, you begin to feel what the Buddha was pointing to in his last words. You begin to feel, in your own body and breath, that everything is impermanent, and that this is not something to fear. It is simply the nature of being alive. There is something the Buddha said at the very end of his life that we rarely sit with long enough to feel. His last teaching, whispered to his students as he lay dying, was not a secret doctrine or a hidden truth. It was simpler and harder than that. He said that all things are impermanent. All meetings end in parting. All accumulations end in dispersal. Everything that comes together will come apart. We know this in our minds. We have heard it before. But there is a difference between knowing something and turning toward it when it arrives at our own door. Most of us do the opposite. We turn away. Think of how the day ends. The light does not announce it's leaving. It simply fades. There is no moment where you can point and say, here is where the brightness became darkness. It is gradual, then sudden, then complete. And in that transition, something in us resists. We turn on lamps. We close the curtains. We fill the evening with noise and distraction. Not always consciously, just a quiet aversion, a small pushing away. This is what happens with all endings, large and small. A conversation ends, and we think of what we should have said. A job changes, and we cling to how things used to be. Someone we love moves away, and we scroll through old photographs instead of feeling the absence. Even a meal ends, and we reach for something else before the taste has left our mouth. We are always turning away from the moment when something we held closes its hand and lets go. The aversion is not a flaw. It is not something to judge yourself for. It is a very old habit wired into us. When something pleasant ends, we want to hold it back. When something difficult ends, we want to hurry past it without looking. Either way, we are not present to what is actually happening. We are somewhere else, in memory or anticipation, anywhere but in the direct experience of parting itself. The Buddha's last words point to something different. Not acceptance in the sense of resignation or defeat. Something quieter. A willingness to look at what is ending without flinching. To stay in the room while the light leaves the sky. There is a particular kind of learning that only happens at the threshold of loss. When you are truly present to something ending, you see it more clearly than when it was whole. You notice details you overlooked while it was still there. The specific tone of someone's voice. The particular way a season smelled. The texture of a time in your life that you thought would never change. Impermanence is not just an idea. It is a form of attention. It teaches you what mattered. But we have to be willing to feel the sting of it. Not to dramatize it or make it into a story. Just to notice when that small contraction happens in the chest, when something ends and part of you wants to look away. That is the moment. That is where the teaching is. Consider what happens in your body when you encounter an ending. Perhaps it is small. A conversation with someone ends, and you realize you will not see them again for months. Or a project you have been working on is finished, and there is a sudden emptiness in your days. Or you notice that a habit you have had for years has quietly disappeared, and you will never do it quite that way again. There is a moment where you feel it. A slight tightness, a flutter, a heaviness, and then, almost immediately, the mind moves. It plans something else. It thinks about what comes next. It looks away. What if, just once, you stayed there a moment longer, not fighting the feeling, not trying to fix it or understand it or make it mean something? Just present to the fact that something is ending, that this is what endings feel like in the body, that this is what impermanence actually is when it is not a philosophy, but a lived experience. The Buddha did not teach impermanence as a way to become detached or cold. He taught it because seeing it clearly is the only way to stop suffering needlessly. When you understand that all things change, you stop demanding that they stay still. You stop being surprised by loss. You stop turning away from it as though it were a mistake, something that should not be happening. You see it as the nature of things. And in that seeing, something shifts. There is a practice that moves quietly through this teaching. It does not require anything special. Today, as you move through your hours, notice one small loss. It might be as simple as finishing a cup of tea, a conversation ending, the moment a piece of music stops, the realization that a season is passing. It does not have to be dramatic. In fact, the smaller the loss, the easier it is to feel it clearly without the mind spinning stories around it. When you notice it, pause. Feel where it lands in you. There may be a small sadness. There may be nothing at all. There may be a resistance, a quick turning away. Whatever arises, let it be there. You do not have to do anything with it. You are simply learning to stay present to the fact that things end. That this is not a tragedy. That this is how life moves. As you do this, you may notice something unexpected. The willingness to be present to a small ending does not make you sadder. It makes you more alive. It makes the moments that are still here feel more vivid. The light in the room becomes brighter when you are no longer resisting the fact that it will fade. The Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree in his final hours, and the last words he spoke were simple. All things are impermanent. Anicca, not as a warning, not as a call to renounce the world, simply as an observation. A statement so quiet it might have been mistaken for the wind moving through leaves. We hear those words now, and something in us tightens. We feel the weight of loss already, before loss arrives. If nothing lasts, we think, then nothing matters. The meal we are eating will be digested. The person we love will one day no longer be here. The work we do will crumble. The body we inhabit will fail. So why care? Why try? Why love at all? This is the confusion that lives in us. We have tangled impermanence together with meaninglessness, as if they were the same thread. They are not. A river carves stone over centuries. The stone is hard. The river is soft. The water does not insist. It does not demand that the stone surrender. It simply moves, day after day, year after year, touching the same surface with gentle persistence. And the stone changes, not because the river forced it, because the river was willing to be what it was, moment after moment, without clinging to the outcome. The stone does not become less real because it changes. The river does not become meaningless because it will eventually evaporate or empty into the sea. The teaching that emerges from the Buddha's last observation is this: because all things are empty of permanence, all things are possible. Not in some abstract spiritual sense, concretely. Because nothing is fixed, nothing is trapped. Because the stone can be carved, water can nourish, a person can change their mind. A heart that was closed can open. A habit that seemed unbreakable can dissolve. A relationship that felt dead can come alive again. We live as if permanence were the measure of worth. We cling to moments, trying to make them stay. We push away moments we dislike, trying to make them leave faster. Both movements are exhausting. Both are based on a misreading of reality. When you stop expecting things to last, something shifts. Not into despair, into clarity. You begin to see what is actually here in this breath, in this moment. The warmth of tea in your hands. The particular way light falls on a surface you have seen 1,000 times, but never quite like this. The specific texture of a conversation with someone you care for, unrepeatable, happening now. These things are not less precious because they will change. They are precious because they are here now, because they are vulnerable, because they require your presence to be fully known. The Buddha did not say all things are impermanent to make us sad. He said it to wake us up, to free us from the exhausting work of trying to freeze time, to show us that the only moment we actually have is this one, and this one, and this one. There is a practice that lives inside this understanding. It is not something you do once and complete. It is something you return to, again and again, in the quiet moments when you are willing to sit with a question that has no quick answer. Sit with this: what matters when nothing lasts. Do not try to answer it with words. Let it be a question that lives in your body, in your breath. When you ask it, you may feel resistance. You may feel sadness. You may feel a strange kind of freedom. All of these are okay. None of them are wrong. As you sit, you might notice that the things that matter most are often the smallest things. The kindness of someone who remembered how you take your coffee. The way your body feels when you stretch after sitting still. The moment when you understood something you had been confused about. These things are not permanent, but they are real. They are here, and they are enough. The river does not mourn the stone it shapes. It does not celebrate its work. It simply flows, touching what is in front of it with complete attention. And over time, something that seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The stone becomes a canyon. The water becomes a force that shaped the earth itself. Not because the river was strong, because it was willing to be itself, moment after moment, without clinging to permanence. When you sit with the question, what matters when nothing lasts, you begin to feel the difference between clinging and caring. Clinging is tight. It grasps, it is afraid. Caring is open, it is present. It allows things to be as they are, to change as they will, while still meeting them with full attention. This is not resignation. This is not giving up. This is the deepest form of engagement with life. Because you are no longer wasting your energy trying to stop the river. You are learning to move with it, to see what becomes possible when you stop fighting what is already true. The Buddha's last words were not a prophecy of loss. They were an invitation to wake up to what is actually here, in a world that is always moving, always becoming, always offering itself to us in ways we cannot control or predict. And in that offering, if we are willing to be present, we find something that does not depend on permanence to be real. And the Buddha's last words in his final hours, the Buddha sat beneath a tree in Kushinagar. His body was failing. His students gathered close, knowing the end was near. And in that moment, with his last conscious breath, he offered them a teaching that would echo through centuries. All things are impermanent. Decay is inherent in all conditioned things. Work out your own liberation with diligence. It is a strange thing to say at the moment of death, not a comfort. Not a promise of what comes after, just a clear statement about the nature of things as they are, followed by an instruction to work, to act, to tend. There is a misunderstanding that often settles in the mind when we first hear this teaching. It sounds like acceptance. It sounds like letting go. And from there, something quiet happens, a kind of resignation. If everything passes, why bother? If nothing lasts, why plant anything at all? Why care for what will inevitably fade? But listen to what the Buddha actually said. Not just the first part about impermanence, the second part. Work out your own liberation with diligence. He did not say, sit still and accept. He said, work. A gardener understands this in her body. She knows that every plant will eventually wither. The rose will bloom and drop its petals. The tomato vine will bear fruit and then decline. The entire garden exists within time. Nothing in it is permanent, and yet the gardener does not stand idle in this knowledge. She does not think, why water if the flowers will die? Instead, she waters more carefully. She tends the soil. She notices which plants need shade and which need sun. She works precisely because she knows each season is limited, each bloom is rare. The impermanence is not a reason to withdraw. It is the reason to engage. This is what equanimity actually means. Not indifference. Not a kind of emotional flatness where nothing matters. Equanimity is a clear-eyed steadiness in the face of what is true. It is the gardener's hand on the soil, knowing what she knows, and continuing anyway. It is showing up to the work because the work matters, not because the work will last forever. When we really feel this, not just understand it in our minds, but sense it in our bones, something shifts. The pressure drops away. There is no need to make things permanent. There is no need to clutch at outcomes or despair when they change. But there is also no permission to be careless or absent. In fact, the opposite becomes true. Knowing that this moment is the only moment we have to act, that this breath is the only breath available to us right now, we become more attentive, not less. The gardener does not neglect her plants because they are temporary. She pays closer attention to them. She notices the subtle signs of thirst, of disease, of readiness to bloom. Her knowledge of impermanence makes her a better gardener. And so it is with our own lives. When we stop fighting against the fact that everything changes, we are freed to actually live within that change. We can be kind to someone we love without needing that kindness to produce a permanent result. We can work towards something meaningful without demanding that our work be remembered forever. We can help and release the outcome. We can try and let go of the fruits of trying. This is not passivity. This is the deepest form of engagement. The Buddha's last instruction was not to accept impermanence and then do nothing. It was to see impermanence clearly and then to work with even greater care, to tend your own awakening the way a gardener tends a garden, with attention, with patience, with the knowledge that seasons change, and that this is precisely why the work matters. Notice what happens in your body when you truly consider this. There may be a kind of relief, the exhaustion that comes from trying to make things permanent, that can ease. At the same time, there may be a quiet activation, a sense that something is being asked of you, not demanded, asked. The practice that emerges from this is simple enough that it can happen in a single day. Choose one kind action today, something small, a word of patience with someone, an act of care for your own body, a moment of attention given freely to another person. Something that costs you something, but not because you are trying to earn enlightenment or prove your worth. Do it knowing that the effect will ripple outward and then fade, knowing that the person you help may forget, knowing that the kindness will not be permanent. Do it anyway. Do it precisely because you know these things. This is what the Buddha meant. This is the diligence he spoke of. Not grim effort, not self-improvement driven by fear, but a clear, steady tending of what is in front of you, with the full knowledge that it will all pass, and that this knowledge makes the tending precious. The gardener plants in spring knowing winter will come. The Buddha spoke of impermanence at the moment of his own death, and in that same breath, he told his students to work. We sit now with those final words. All things are impermanent. Not a warning, not a teaching to memorize, just what the Buddha saw clearly until his very last breath. He did not say this to frighten anyone. He said it because it was true. Because clinging to what cannot stay causes the heart to ache. Because release comes not from holding tighter, but from seeing what is already happening. You might notice, even now, that the breath you just took is gone. The thought that arose a moment ago has dissolved. The feeling in your body has shifted, even if only slightly. Nothing waits for permission to change. It simply does. This is not philosophy. This is the texture of being alive. When the Buddha spoke those words, he was not standing apart from impermanence, pointing at it from a distance. He was lying down, his body failing, his life ending. He was inside the truth he was naming, and still, there was no panic in his voice, no grasping, just clarity. That clarity is available to you, not because you are special, but because impermanence does not play favorites. It moves through all of us, through every breath, every season, every relationship, every moment of joy and every moment of pain. The question is not whether things will change. They will. The question is whether you will meet that change with resistance or with openness. Resistance feels like tightness, like bracing, like the mind saying, no, not this, not yet, not now. And that resistance does not stop the change. It only makes the change feel like violence. Openness feels different. It feels like softness, like the exhale that follows the inhale without effort, like the way water moves around a stone. There is still loss, there is still grief, but there is also space. Room to feel what is here without collapsing under the weight of what should be. The Buddha did not ask his students to become detached. He asked them to see clearly, to stop pretending that clinging could make anything permanent, to stop believing that if they just held on hard enough, they could freeze a single moment in time. You cannot. None of us can. And that is not a failure. That is the condition of existence. What happens when you stop fighting it? When you let the breath leave? When you let the day end? When you allow the feeling to pass through without demanding that it stay or insisting that it leave faster? Something softens. The heart, which has been clenched around the desire for permanence, begins to open. Not because you have given up, but because you have finally stopped trying to control what was never yours to control. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you care without the delusion that your caring can stop time. You love without the fantasy that love makes anything immortal. You grieve without the belief that grief is a mistake. All things are impermanent, even grief, even joy, even this moment right now as you listen. The Buddha knew this, and knowing it, he was free. Free to be present, free to let go, free to meet his death without terror, because he had already released his grip on the illusion that anything could be otherwise. You do not have to wait until your last breath to practice this. You can practice it now, with the small things, the way the light changes in the room, the way a conversation ends, the way a thought fades before you can fully grasp it. Each time you notice impermanence without panic, you are touching the same freedom the Buddha touched. Each time you let something go, because it is already going, you are walking the path he walked. There is no arrival point, no moment when you have mastered impermanence and can finally rest. The practice is the resting. The seeing is the freedom. And so we come to the end of these words. They, too, are impermanent. They will fade from your memory. The sound of this voice will dissolve into silence. And that is exactly as it should be. If you wish, there are other reflections waiting, other threads to follow. But there is no urgency. The teachings are not going anywhere, even as everything else does. What remains when you stop trying to hold on to anything at all?